The dashboard clock read 3:17 a.m. as my 18-wheeler rumbled down the deserted stretch of highway locals called Route 666. Official maps listed it as State Route 247, but no one who regularly drove it used that name. The road wound through the Appalachian foothills of southeastern Ohio like a black river, cutting through dense forests unmarked by streetlights or civilization. Rain pelted my windshield in hypnotic patterns, the wipers barely keeping pace. Lightning occasionally illuminated the towering trees that pressed close to the road's edge, their twisted branches reaching over the asphalt like gnarled fingers. In those brief flashes, I sometimes glimpsed things moving among the trees, things that had no business being there. This wasn't my first choice of routes. Hell, it wasn't even my fifth. But when the trucking company offered double pay for daily runs along 666, desperation outweighed my instincts. My daughter's medical bills had piled up faster than autumn leaves, and the bank had already sent 2 foreclosure warnings. My CB radio crackled with static, making me jump. No one broadcasted on this route after midnight. Not anymore. Not since whatever happened to Eddie Bowman 3 years back. They found his truck parked perfectly in the middle of the road, hazards blinking, engine running. Eddie was gone, leaving nothing but his boots placed neatly on the driver's seat, each filled with teeth that weren't human. I still remembered my first day at Wilson Freight Lines, when the night dispatcher, a leathery old-timer named Hank, had silently handed me a sealed envelope after assigning me to Route 666. "What's this?" I'd asked. "Rules," Hank had replied, not meeting my eyes. "Read 'em, memorize 'em, follow 'em exactly. Don't ask me to explain 'em." That night in my motel room, I'd opened the envelope to find a handwritten list on yellowed paper. The handwriting changed several times throughout the document, as if it had been added to by different people over many years. Rules for driving, Route 666. Rule 1. Drive only between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. Never begin your route before 3 a.m. or remain on it after sunrise. Rule 2. Maintain a speed between 47 to 57 miles per hour. Never go slower or faster, regardless of weather conditions. Rule 3. Do not stop for hitchhikers, no matter who they appear to be, including law enforcement, family members, or children. Rule 4. If you see headlights approaching that flash 3 times, pull as far right as possible, close your eyes, and count to 17. Do not open them earlier, no matter what you hear. Rule 5. Should your radio turn on by itself, immediately turn it off. Do not listen to any voices or music that comes through. Rule 6. There is a mile marker, 117. State records show the route is only 93 miles long. If you see mile marker 117, do not acknowledge it. Rule 7. If you see a white church on the left side of the road, it isn't there. There has never been a church on Route 666. Rule 8. You may encounter a hitchhiker wearing black between miles 37 to 40. Do not look directly at him, but do not ignore him either. Tip your hat or nod exactly once in greeting as you pass. Rule 9. If you see an animal carcass in the road, drive over it, not around it. What looks like roadkill isn't always dead. Rule 10. Should you notice the same car following you for more than 10 minutes, do not accelerate or pull over. Begin humming "You Are My Sunshine" until it turns off. Rule 11. If the temperature inside your cab drops suddenly, recite your full name 3 times clearly. Rule 12. Never answer your phone while on Route 666, even if the caller ID shows someone you know. Rule 13. If you arrive at your destination before 5:45 a.m., remain in your truck with doors locked until exactly 5:45 a.m., no matter what you see or hear outside. I'd laughed after reading it that first night, convinced it was some kind of hazing ritual for new drivers. A week later, after my first encounter with the man in black at mile 38, I stopped laughing. Tonight marked my 37th consecutive run on Route 666, The load of industrial chemical containers in my trailer needed to reach Columbus by morning. The rain intensified as I checked my speedometer. 52 miles per hour. Perfect. Not too fast, not too slow, just as the rules required. As lightning flashed again, I caught a glimpse of something standing at the upcoming bend in the road. A hitchhiker, thumb extended, wearing what looked like an Ohio State Highway Patrol uniform. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Rule 3 was about to be tested again. The officer stood motionless in the rain, water streaming off his campaign hat. As my headlights illuminated him, his face remained unnaturally shadowed despite the direct light. One hand extended with his thumb up. The other rested on what appeared to be a standard-issue sidearm. Rule 3 echoed in my mind. Do not stop for hitchhikers, no matter who they appear to be, including law enforcement, family members, or children. I maintained my speed at exactly 52 miles per hour, knuckles white on the steering wheel. When I was about 50 yards away, the officer's head snapped up, movement too quick and jerky to be human. Though I couldn't see his eyes in the shadow of his hat brim, I felt his gaze lock onto me with predatory intensity. He stepped into the road, directly in my path, and raised his hand in the universal signal to stop. My foot hovered instinctively over the brake pedal. Every conditioning of law-abiding citizenship urged me to comply with an officer's command. But I remembered Eddie Bowman's boots filled with teeth. I held course and speed, refusing to slow or swerve. The officer remained in position until the last possible moment, when my truck was barely 20 feet away. Then his form seemed to ripple, like heat distortion on summer asphalt. As I drove through where he had been standing, the temperature in my cab plummeted. My breath clouded before me, and the windows frosted over in seconds. The speedometer needle trembled, threatening to dip below the critical 47 miles per hour minimum. Rule 11. If the temperature inside your cab drops suddenly, recite your full name 3 times clearly. Daniel James Mercer, I stated, my voice shaking from both cold and fear. Daniel James Mercer. Daniel James Mercer. A horrific scraping sound erupted from the roof of my cab, like metal claws dragging across steel. Something heavy thudded against my driver's side window. I forced myself to stare straight ahead at the road, even as dark liquid began to ooze down the glass from above. Too thick to be rainwater, too dark to be anything I wanted to identify. The temperature gauge on my dashboard dropped from a comfortable 72 degrees to 29 in seconds. Ice crystals formed on my eyebrows and lashes. My teeth chattered as I struggled to maintain speed and control on the increasingly slick road. You should have stopped. The voice came from directly behind my seat, where no one should have been. It sounded like gravel being crushed, like a voice that had forgotten how to be human. Badge means stop. Law means stop. I kept my eyes locked on the road ahead. This wasn't the first time one of the Roots entities had made it into my cab. Acknowledging them only gave them power. Something cold and damp pressed against the back of my neck, fingers but too numerous and jointed in ways human fingers couldn't bend. The stench of rot and wet earth filled the cab. "Look at me," the voice roared, the sound distorting my radio and causing my headlights to flicker. Instead, I began humming, "You Are My Sunshine," drawing from Rule 10, even though this wasn't precisely the scenario it described. The old drivers had told me that particular tune was anathema to the things that haunted Route 666, though no one knew why. The humming seemed to work. The pressure on my neck vanished, and the temperature began to climb back toward normal. The scraping on my roof ceased. When I dared to glance at my side mirror, I saw a figure in the road behind me, the officer standing perfectly still, growing smaller as I drove away. Even from a distance, I could see he was no longer in a human stance. His limbs bent at impossible angles. His head rotated 180 degrees to watch my departure. As I rounded the next curve, my radio suddenly blared to life at maximum volume. cycling rapidly through stations, bursts of static, fragments of songs, and voices speaking what sounded like backwards Latin. Rule 5. Should your radio turn on by itself, immediately turn it off. Do not listen to any voices or music that comes through. I slapped the power button, silencing the chaos. The remaining ice on my windows began to melt as the cab temperature normalized. I checked my speedometer, 49 miles per hour, still within parameters. According to my odometer, I was approaching mile 37, the domain of the man in black mentioned in Rule 8. After the highway patrolman, I wasn't eager for another encounter, but the rules were clear. This particular entity needed to be acknowledged, not ignored. The rain had tapered to a drizzle, and patches of mist hovered over the asphalt ahead, illuminated in my headlights like ghostly islands. I rolled down my window an inch, and the smell of the forest infiltrated my cab, pine and loam, but with an underlying metallic tang that reminded me of old pennies. Mile marker 37 appeared in my headlights, reflective numbers gleaming. I slowed marginally to 50 miles per hour and began scanning the roadside for a figure in black. The stretch between miles 37 and 40 was the most consistently nerve-wracking part of my nightly run. Unlike the other apparitions that appeared randomly, the man in black was always there, lurking somewhere in that 3-mile section. The rules surrounding him were peculiarly specific. Don't look directly at him, but don't ignore him either. Acknowledge him exactly once with a nod or tip of the hat as you pass. According to veteran drivers, he'd been haunting that stretch of road since at least the 1950s. No one knew who he was or why he required this strange tribute. Hank had told me that historians found records of a traveling preacher who was lynched in these woods in 1887 for consorting with dark forces. But whether that was related to our hitchhiker was anyone's guess. I scanned the roadside carefully without turning my head too obviously. The mist had thickened, swirling in my headlights and reducing visibility to about 30 yards. Perfect conditions for him to make his appearance. Something dark moved at the edge of my vision. There one moment, gone the next. I maintained my speed at precisely 50 miles per hour, hyper-aware of every shadow. Another flicker of movement, this time on the right shoulder. I kept my eyes on the road, using peripheral vision to track the darting shape. Then I saw him. He stood on the shoulder ahead, just within the reach of my headlights. Unlike the false highway patrolman, the man in black didn't try to flag me down or step into the road. He simply waited, a tall, slender figure, in what appeared to be an old-fashioned black suit and wide-brimmed black hat that obscured his face. He carried an antique valise in one gloved hand. As I approached, I felt a pressure building in my ears, as if I were rapidly changing altitude. The air in the cab seemed to thicken, making each breath an effort. My headlights dimmed despite the engine running smoothly. Rule 8. You may encounter a hitchhiker wearing black between miles 37 to 40. Do not look directly at him, but do not ignore him either. Tip your hat or nod exactly once in greeting as you pass. When I was about even with him, I turned slightly, not looking directly at his face, but acknowledging his presence, and gave a single, deliberate nod. From the corner of my eye, I saw him return the gesture, the movement unnaturally smooth. For a moment, all seemed well. I'd followed the rule correctly. Then my radio turned on by itself again, this time playing what sounded like an old-time gospel hymn sung by a children's choir. Before I could reach for the power button, a deep voice cut through the music.
"Stop for me next time, Daniel James Mercer. I have something of yours."
My daughter's laughter suddenly pealed from the speakers, crystal clear and unmistakable. My blood turned to ice. How could he know about Ellie? How could he have her laugh? I jabbed the radio's power button, silencing the impossible broadcast. When I checked my mirrors, the man in black was gone. In his place stood a small figure, a child-sized silhouette that I refused to examine too closely. Mile marker 40 appeared ahead, signaling the end of the man in black's territory. I exhaled shakily as I passed it, feeling as if I'd been holding my breath for the entire 3-mile stretch. The rules had never mentioned the man in black speaking, nor playing sounds from the radio. Was this an escalation? Had I somehow failed to follow Rule 8 correctly? Or was he simply changing the game? The thought that he might be evolving, learning new ways to torment drivers, was almost more terrifying than the encounter itself. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The screen lit up with my wife's face and name. It was 3:52 a.m. She never called this late unless it was an emergency. My hand instinctively moved toward it before I remembered Rule 12. Never answer your phone while on Route 666, even if the caller ID shows someone you know. I let it ring, each unanswered call twisting my gut with worry. What if something had happened to Ellie? What if they were at the hospital right now trying desperately to reach me? The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. This time, the caller ID showed my daughter's face and the name Ellie. That was impossible. My 8-year-old daughter didn't have her own phone. The screen changed, showing a new text message from Ellie's non-existent number. "Daddy, why won't you answer? I'm scared. The man in the black hat is here." I forced myself to put the phone face down on the passenger seat. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. The entities on Route 666 were notorious for their mind games, for finding the precise vulnerabilities in each driver's psyche. Ahead, through the mist and drizzle, I spotted an animal carcass sprawled across my lane, a deer from the size of it. Rule 9 immediately came to mind. If you see an animal carcass in the road, drive over it, not around it. What looks like roadkill isn't always dead. I steeled myself and maintained course, even as I noticed the deer twitch slightly as my headlights illuminated it fully. The deer lay directly in my path, its form only partially illuminated by my headlights through the persistent mist. From a distance, it looked convincingly like a typical roadkill victim, a mangled heap of brown fur and limbs sprawled across the asphalt. But as I drew closer, maintaining my speed at exactly 53 miles per hour, I noticed disturbing inconsistencies. Its legs were too long and jointed in the wrong places. The head, while deer-like in general shape, had too many points on its antlers. I counted 12 on one side before losing track. Most tellingly, it twitched as my truck approached, the movement subtle but deliberate. Rule 9 was explicit. If you see an animal carcass in the road, drive over it, not around it. What looks like roadkill isn't always dead. I white-knuckled the steering wheel and held course. 50 yards, 40, 30. At 20 yards distance, the deer suddenly convulsed, its head lifting to reveal eyes that reflected my headlights, not with the typical green-gold eye shine of a cervid, but with a deep, blood-red glow. 10 yards. The creature's mouth opened impossibly wide, unhinging like a snake's jaw to reveal row upon row of needle-like teeth. A sound cut through the engine noise, a high-pitched keening that vibrated through my cab and made my fillings ache. Impact. My 18-wheeler shuddered as the front tires rolled over the entity. I felt resistance, far more than a deer-sized creature should provide, as if the thing had anchored itself to the asphalt. The truck lurched upward, then slammed back down as the drive wheels passed over the mass. In my side mirror, I caught a glimpse of the roadkill after I'd passed. It was standing upright now, its form elongating and twisting as it shed the deer disguise. The last clear image before the mist swallowed it was of a tall, emaciated humanoid with too many limbs, its head still crowned with bloody antlers. I checked my speedometer, still a safe of 52 miles per hour, and tried to slow my hammering heart. That had been close. If I'd swerved around the creature, the rules suggested it would have somehow attached itself to my vehicle, or worse. The clock on my dashboard read 4:12 a.m. I was making good time despite the encounters. Another few miles and I'd reach. A glint of metal caught my eye as I rounded a bend. Mile marker 117. My breath caught. According to Rule 6, this marker shouldn't exist. The entire Route 666 was only 93 miles long according to state records. Yet here was mile marker 117, reflective numbers clearly visible in my headlights. Rule 6. There is a mile marker 117. State records show the route is only 93 miles long. If you see mile marker 117, do not acknowledge it. I kept my eyes forward, pretending I hadn't seen the impossible marker. The road ahead began to change subtly. The asphalt seemed older, cracked in places, with faded lane markings. The forest pressed closer to the shoulders, tree branches forming an almost tunnel-like canopy overhead. This wasn't the Route 666 I knew. It was as if I'd somehow turned onto an older version of the road, a forgotten variant that existed alongside the modern highway. My headlights illuminated another sign ahead. Crossroads, 1 mile. I'd driven this route every night for over a month and had never seen a crossroads or intersection of any kind. The rational part of my mind scrambled for explanations. Had I somehow turned off Route 666 without noticing? Was I hallucinating from fatigue? Or had acknowledging mile marker 117, even mentally, broken Rule 6 and transported me somewhere else? As I pondered these questions, 3 flashes of light appeared ahead, headlights blinking in a deliberate pattern. Rule 4 immediately came to mind. If you see headlights approaching that flash 3 times, pull as far right as possible, close your eyes, and count to 17. Do not open them earlier, no matter what you hear. I eased my truck to the far right of the lane, tires rumbling over the shoulder rumble strips. Once positioned, I closed my eyes and began counting aloud. 1, 2, 3. The approaching vehicle's engine grew louder, a deep, throaty rumble unlike any modern car or truck. 4, 5, 6. The sound stopped directly alongside my cab. I could feel heat radiating through my closed driver's side window. 7, 8, 9. A tapping on my window. Then a voice, deep and resonant, yet somehow hollow. Open your eyes, driver. See what travels these roads after midnight. 10, 11, 12. I continued, ignoring the voice. The tapping became a pounding. The entire truck rocked slightly. Look at me, the voice demanded, now distorted with rage. 13, 14, 15. A screech of metal as something sharp dragged along my trailer. 16, 17. I opened my eyes. The road ahead was empty and normal. The strange quality of the asphalt was gone. The forest once again at its proper distance from the shoulder. My odometer showed I was at mile 63, exactly where I should have been before the marker 117 incident. Whatever had pulled alongside me was gone, leaving only a lingering smell of burning rubber and sulfur. I checked my side mirror and saw long gouges in the side of my trailer, as if massive claws had raked across the metal. My phone buzzed again. This time the caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, with an area code I'd never seen before. The screen displayed, "Accept the charges from mile marker 117. I immediately powered off the phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat. The rules never mentioned phone calls from mile markers, but it seemed prudent to avoid any form of communication with the entities of Route 666. Up ahead, bathed in moonlight that suddenly broke through the clouds, stood a small white church on the left side of the road. Its steeple gleamed, and warm light shone from its stained glass windows despite the early hour. It looked welcoming, peaceful, a sanctuary in the darkness. Rule 7 echoed in my mind. If you see a white church on the left side of the road, it isn't there. There has never been a church on Route 666. The white church shouldn't exist. Rule 7 was adamant about that. Yet there it stood on the left side of the road, its pristine clapboard siding gleaming under the moonlight like bleached bone. The stained glass windows depicted scenes I couldn't quite make out from the road, but they glowed with warm, inviting light. The steeple reached toward the night sky, topped with a cross that seemed to shimmer despite the absence of wind. I kept my eyes forward, repeating Rule 7 to myself. If you see a white church on the left side of the road, it isn't there. There has never been a church on Route 666. As I drove past, church bells began to toll, deep, resonant chimes that shouldn't have been audible over my engine's rumble. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 13 before falling silent. 13 chimes, 13 hours, an impossible time. In my side mirror, I saw the church doors swing open, releasing a flood of golden light onto the road. Silhouettes appeared in the doorway, people exiting the church, turning toward my truck, raising their hands in unison as if beckoning me to return. My truck's CB radio crackled to life, though I'd turned it off hours ago. "Come back, driver." The voice sounded elderly, gentle, a kindly pastor inviting a lost soul to worship. "Services are just beginning. We've saved you a seat in the front pew." I kept driving, maintaining my speed at exactly 54 miles per hour. Not too fast, not too slow. "Your daughter is here," the voice continued, its kindly tone never wavering. "Ellie misses you. She wants you to join our congregation." My hands trembled on the steering wheel. They always knew exactly what buttons to push. Turn around. Last chance for salvation. The voice changed suddenly, multiplying into a chorus of speakers. Last chance before the harvest. I checked my side mirror again. The church was still visible much further back than it should have been given my speed. The congregants had spilled onto the road now, dozens of them, all in white garments that glowed faintly in the moonlight. As I watched, they began to change, their forms elongating, limbs stretching to impossible lengths, heads tilting at unnatural angles. They began to run after my truck. I focused on the road ahead, refusing to watch their pursuit in my mirrors. The sound of the CB changed to a wet, rhythmic squelching, like dozens of feet running through mud, getting closer by the second. The temperature dropped again, frost forming on my windows despite the heater running at full blast. I recited my name as per Rule 11, Daniel James Mercer, Daniel James Mercer, Daniel James Mercer. The frost receded slightly, but the running sounds continued, now accompanied by high-pitched howls that bore only passing resemblance to human voices. Something thumped against the back of my cab. They were catching up. Ahead, I saw Salvation, a cattle crossing grate embedded in the asphalt. Local legends said iron repelled the entities of Route 666, and I'd noticed the running sounds always stopped at these grates during previous encounters. My truck rumbled over the grate, steel wheels clanging against iron. The howling behind me rose to a fever pitch, then abruptly ceased. In my mirror, I saw the white church shimmer like a mirage before vanishing completely, taking its congregation with it. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The clock read 4:37 a.m., less than 90 minutes until sunrise, when the road would return to normal, or as normal as it ever got. My relief was short-lived. Headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, a single vehicle maintaining the same speed as my truck, staying exactly the same distance behind me. It had been following for several minutes now, never gaining or falling back. Rule 10 clicked into my mind. Should you notice the same car following you for more than 10 minutes, do not accelerate or pull over. Begin humming, "You Are My Sunshine," until it turns off. I began humming the cheerful tune, trying to focus on the melody rather than the persistent headlights behind me. The song had always seemed out of place among the other rules. too mundane, too innocent for the horrors of Route 666. Yet veteran drivers insisted it was one of the most important rules. After several repetitions of the song, I checked my mirror again. The headlights remained, unwavering in their pursuit. This was unusual. Normally, the following vehicle would have turned off by now. I hummed louder, more deliberately, watching as the headlights suddenly expanded, growing brighter and separating into multiple pairs. What had been one vehicle was now 3, then 5, then dozens. A convoy of light stretching back as far as I could see. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the lingering chill. This was new. This was wrong. The rules weren't working as they should. A horn blared from the lead vehicle. Not a standard automotive horn, but something that sounded like a brass instrument played by inhuman lungs. The other vehicles joined in, creating a discordant symphony that penetrated my cab despite the closed windows. I couldn't outrun them. Rule 2 forbade exceeding 57 miles per hour. I couldn't pull over. Rule 10 explicitly prohibited that. All I could do was continue humming "You Are My Sunshine" and hope that whatever was happening would resolve itself according to the road's twisted logic. The lead vehicle accelerated suddenly, pulling alongside my truck. It wasn't a car or truck as I'd assumed, but something resembling an antique hearse, black, with ornate silver scrollwork along its sides and small curtained windows. The windows in the passenger compartment were illuminated from within by a sickly green light. The hearse paced me exactly, matching my speed of the precise 55 miles per hour I'd settled on. The driver's window rolled down smoothly, revealing darkness where a face should have been. A voice emanated from that darkness, somehow audible over the road noise. "Pull over, Daniel. Your ride is here." I kept humming, the cheerful melody incongruous with the terror flooding my system. "The man in black sends his regards," the voice continued. "He says you've been ignoring his invitations. That's very rude, Daniel." I hummed louder, my voice cracking with strain. The hearse edged closer, its ancient metal nearly kissing my truck's modern chassis. From within the passenger compartment, pale hands pressed against the curtained windows. Too many hands for the space available. Fingers elongating and contracting in a rhythmic pattern that matched my humming. "Your sunshine is fading, Daniel," the voice said, amusement evident in its hollow tone. "We've learned your songs. We've learned all the rules." The hearse dropped back suddenly, rejoining the convoy behind me. When I next checked my mirror, the multitude of headlights had merged back into a single pair, which flickered once before disappearing entirely around a bend. My humming tapered off, replaced by ragged breathing. Something fundamental had changed on Route 666. The rules were no longer providing the protection they once had. The entities were adapting, evolving, learning to circumvent the safeguards that drivers had relied on for decades. As if confirming my fears, my GPS suddenly powered on, displaying a route I hadn't programmed. The mechanical voice spoke. "Recalculating. Turn around when possible. Destination, mile marker 117. I yanked the GPS unit's power cord, silencing its ominous directions. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly swerved out of my lane. The eastern sky remained stubbornly dark, though my dashboard clock read 5:03 a.m. Sunrise should be approaching, but the night seemed to be holding its grip with unusual tenacity. The convoy of mysterious vehicles had disappeared, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, still being pursued by something that had learned to hide itself better than before. The rules that had protected drivers for decades were failing. The entities of Route 666 were adapting. I forced myself to focus on the immediate goal, maintaining speed between 47 to 57 miles per hour, and making it to my destination. According to my calculations, I should reach the Columbus delivery dock by 5:30 a.m., well before the 6 a.m. cutoff mentioned in Rule 1. Once there, I'd need to follow Rule 13. If you arrive at your destination before 5:45 a.m., remain in your truck with doors locked until exactly 5:45 a.m., no matter what you see or hear outside. The road ahead curved sharply around a hillside, revealing a sight that made my blood run cold. A tractor trailer lay on its side across both lanes, emergency lights flashing weakly. The wreck completely blocked the highway, making passage impossible without leaving the road entirely. I eased off the accelerator, dropping to the minimum allowed 47 miles per hour, while I assessed the situation. There was no rule specifically addressing roadblocks or accidents. Did I need to maintain my speed and find a way around? Or was slowing below 47 miles per hour permissible in this scenario? As I drew closer, I noticed disturbing details about the crash. There were no skid marks leading to the overturned truck, no debris field as would be expected from a high-speed accident. The cab was undamaged, despite the trailer lying on its side. Most telling of all, there were no emergency responders despite the flashing lights. This wasn't a real accident. It was a trap. I checked my speedometer. 47 miles per hour exactly. If I slowed further to navigate around the wreck, I'd break Rule 2. If I maintained speed, I'd crash directly into it. Neither option seemed survivable. In desperation, I scanned the rules again in my mind, looking for loopholes or exceptions. Rule 10 prohibited pulling over when followed, but said nothing about other circumstances. Perhaps I could stop briefly, then accelerate back to the safe range. That felt wrong. The rules existed for a reason, even if that reason wasn't always clear. As I rapidly approached the overturned truck, I noticed something else. The crashed vehicle's logo matched my own company's. The truck number painted on the cab was 117, the impossible mile marker number. This wasn't just any trap. It was meant specifically for me. With 50 yards to go and no clear solution, I made a decision. I'd maintain my speed, but use the narrow shoulder to squeeze past. It would be tight, with barely inches between my truck and the wrecked trailer, but it might allow me to both follow Rule 2 and survive. At 30 yards, the driver's door of the overturned cab swung open. A figure pulled itself out, a mirror image of myself, down to the blue cap and flannel shirt I was currently wearing. My doppelganger stood in the road, watching my approach with black, empty eye sockets. 20 yards. I held course for the narrow gap between the wreck and the guardrail, maintaining exactly 47 miles per hour. My double raised its arms, mouth opening impossibly wide as if to swallow my oncoming truck whole. 10 yards. I braced for impact, unsure if my plan would work or if I was driving to my doom. The clock on my dashboard flickered, digits scrambling before settling on 5:17 a.m. The instant before I reached the wreck, reality shifted. The overturned truck and my doppelganger vanished like smoke, leaving only empty highway before me. I swerved back into my lane. In my rearview mirror, I saw something massive moving in the forest behind me. A shadowy form that seemed to flow between the trees, keeping pace with my truck despite its size. Whatever it was far larger than any natural animal, its shape constantly morphing as it pursued me. The forest gave way to open farmland as I approached the outskirts of Columbus. Civilization, such as it was at 5:20 a.m., began to appear. The occasional farmhouse with lights on, a gas station with its fluorescent glare cutting through the darkness. The presence behind me seemed to hesitate at the forest's edge before retreating back into the tree line. The delivery dock appeared ahead, a welcome sight after the night's horrors. I pulled into the loading area at exactly 5:28 a.m., 17 minutes before the safe time specified in Rule 13. I'd need to stay locked in my cab until 5:45, regardless of what happened outside. I shut off the engine but left the keys in the ignition, just in case. The sudden silence was almost as unnerving as the supernatural encounters had been. After a night of constant vigilance, the stillness felt wrong, deceptive. Movement caught my eye. A security guard approaching my truck, flashlight in hand. He wore the standard uniform of the distribution center, his ID badge clearly visible, his face normal and human in the harsh security lights. He gestured for me to roll down my window. Rule 13 echoed in my mind. If you arrive at your destination before 5:45 a.m., remain in your truck with doors locked until exactly 5:45 a.m., no matter what you see or hear outside. I remained motionless, windows up, doors locked. The guard frowned, tapping his flashlight against my door. When I didn't respond, he raised a radio to his mouth, presumably calling for backup. "Sir, I need you to exit the vehicle immediately," he called, voice muffled through the glass. "There's a hazardous materials situation. Your trailer is leaking." I checked my watch. 5:32 a.m. Still 13 minutes to go. The guard's expression grew increasingly desperate. "Sir, please. The chemicals you're hauling are highly toxic. We're evacuating the facility. You need to come with me now." I remained still, though sweat beaded on my forehead. What if this was legitimate? What if my cargo really was leaking? I was transporting industrial chemicals after all. 2 more guards appeared, along with a man in a hazmat suit who began gesturing frantically at my trailer. The first guard pounded on my window now, his face reddening with exertion. "For God's sake, man, you're putting everyone at risk. Get out now." My resolve wavered. What if the rules of Route 666 didn't apply once I'd reached my destination? What if I was risking lives based on superstition? The man in the hazmat suit collapsed suddenly, convulsing on the ground. The guards knelt beside him, one turning to me with a look of pure hatred. "He's dying because of you. Open the door." My hand moved toward the door lock, then froze. Through the commotion, I noticed something odd. The clock on the facility wall behind them showed 3:17 a.m., not 5:30 something. The exact time I'd started my route. This wasn't real. I withdrew my hand and sat back, watching as the guards realized their ruse had failed. Their faces contorted with rage, features melting and reforming into something inhuman. The man in the hazmat suit stood up, his movements jerky and wrong, like a marionette with tangled strings. They surrounded my truck, pressing against the windows, their fingers elongating into claws that scratched at the glass, faces pressed against the windshield. Not just the guards now, but everyone I'd encountered on Route 666. The highway patrolman, the man in black, the congregants from the non-existent church, all watching me with hollow eyes, all chanting something I couldn't quite hear. I closed my eyes and began reciting my rules. The scratching intensified, accompanied by the sound of metal groaning under pressure. My truck rocked slightly, as if something massive was leaning against it. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, my watch beeped softly. 5:45 a.m. I opened my eyes. The loading dock was normal and empty. No guards, no hazmat suits, no supernatural entities. Just the early morning light beginning to touch the eastern sky. Rule 13 had saved my life, just as the other rules had throughout the night. But the entities were getting smarter, their deceptions more elaborate. How long before they found a way around every rule? How long before the thin barrier between their world and ours collapsed entirely? As I climbed down from my cab on shaky legs, I noticed something tucked under my windshield wiper. A folded piece of paper identical to the one Hank had given me with the original rules. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a single new rule written in fresh ink. Rule 14. The rules are changing. We're changing them. Next time, there will be no sunrise. I stuffed the ominous note into my pocket with trembling hands and began the unloading process. The distribution center had come alive with the morning shift. Forklift operators, inventory managers, and shipping clerks bustling about their business. Normal people doing normal jobs, oblivious to the nightmarish world that existed just a few hours and miles away on Route 666. After completing the delivery paperwork, I headed to the driver's lounge to catch a few hours of sleep before my return journey. The thought of going back made my stomach clench, but I had little choice. My daughter's medical treatments weren't getting any cheaper, and the double pay for the Route 666 run made the difference between keeping our house and losing it. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the guards outside my truck, their faces melting into inhuman configurations. I saw mile marker 117 gleaming in my headlights. I saw the man in black, waiting patiently by the roadside for my next passing. At noon, I gave up on rest and headed to the small diner adjacent to the distribution center. The place was frequented by truckers and warehouse workers, its vinyl booths worn smooth from decades of use. I slid into my usual corner booth and ordered coffee strong enough to dissolve a spoon. Rough night? The waitress, Doris, had served me enough times to recognize the signs of Route 666 in my face. The hollow eyes, the slight tremor in my hands, the way I positioned myself to see all exits. You could say that. I didn't elaborate. Those who knew about the route knew better than to ask for details. "Got someone asking about you earlier?" Doris said as she topped off my coffee. "Older guy, funny accent, left a message case you came in." She handed me a napkin with spidery handwriting covering one side. The message was brief, but chilling. Rules changing. "Need to talk. Riverside Motel, room 13. H. Had to be Hank, the night dispatcher who'd given me the rules in the first place. But why would he be in Columbus? And why the cryptic message about rules changing, echoing the note I'd found on my windshield? I finished my coffee, left cash on the table, and headed out. The Riverside Motel was a seedy establishment by the Scioto River, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. It took me 20 minutes to find it, tucked between abandoned warehouses on the city's west side. Room 13 was at the far end of the building, partially hidden by overgrown shrubs. I knocked 3 times, hand instinctively positioned to reach for the knife in my pocket if needed. The door opened a crack, revealing a sliver of Hank's weathered face. "You followed," he said, voice raspy with age and cigarettes. "Good, getting quick." I stepped inside, immediately assessing the dingy room for threats and exits. Hank had transformed the space into something resembling a war room. Maps covered one wall, detailed surveys of Route 666, with annotations in red marker and post-it notes. The opposite wall held newspaper clippings about accidents and disappearances along the route, dating back to the 1940s. "Been trying to reach you," Hank said, securing multiple locks on the door. "Phone calls don't work on the route anymore. They listen now." "What's happening, Hank?" "The rules aren't working like they used to. The things out there, they're evolving," he finished, shuffling to a table covered with ancient-looking books. "Getting smarter, finding loopholes." He picked up a leather-bound journal and handed it to me. This belonged to the first night dispatcher at Wilson Freight, started in 1938, before the route was even called 666. Back then, there was only one rule: don't drive it at night. I opened the journal carefully, its pages yellowed and brittle. The earliest entries described strange sightings along the route, shadows that moved independently of their casters, animals with too many limbs, travelers who spoke in tongues unknown to man. "What changed?" I asked, flipping through decades of increasingly disturbing accounts. "Progress." Hank spat the word like a curse. "Road got expanded in 52, cut through an old burial ground deeper in the woods. Native American mostly, but older things too. things that were buried with specific rituals to keep them bound. He pointed to the most recent section of his wall map. Construction last year widened the shoulder here, between miles 37 and 40, the man in black's territory. They disturbed something else? Worse, they broke the last binding. Hank pulled out a faded photograph showing a large stone partially buried in the earth near the roadside. Symbols I didn't recognize were carved into its surface. County engineers removed it, thought it was just an old property marker. And now the rules are changing, I said, remembering the note on my windshield. Failing, Hank corrected grimly. The rules were never meant to be permanent. They were accommodations, ways to navigate through the entity's territory without becoming prey. But they were based on a truce of sorts, a truce that required those binding stones to remain in place. I thought about the man in black speaking directly to me, something he'd never done with other drivers according to truckers' lore. The entities adapting to "You are my sunshine," the note threatening no sunrise next time. So, what do we do? I asked. I can't stop driving the route. My daughter... I know about Ellie, Hank interrupted. That's why they're focused on you. You've got something to lose, something you care about more than your own safety. Makes you vulnerable. He reached into his pocket and removed a small leather pouch. New rules. Memorize them before tonight. The old ones still apply when they work, but these are amendments. I took the pouch, surprised by its weight. Inside was a folded paper similar to my original rules list, along with a small object wrapped in cloth. "What's this?" I asked, unwrapping the object to reveal what looked like an antique pocket watch, its case made of tarnished silver with strange symbols etched around the edge. "Protection," Hank said. "Been in my family 4 generations. It's why I survived dispatching for Route 666 all these years without going insane or worse." He pointed to the symbols. "These match the binding stones they removed. Watch won't stop them completely, but it'll buy you time to implement the new rules." I studied the watch, noticing that its face didn't show traditional hours. Instead, it had 13 symbols arranged in a circle, with a single hand that currently pointed to what looked like a stylized eye. "How does it work?" Hank's expression darkened. "It measures proximity, not time. When the hand moves, something's getting closer. When it points to the skull, they've found you." He moved to the window, peering through the blinds. "You should go. Get back on the road before dark. They're stronger after sunset, even off the route." As I rose to leave, Hank grabbed my arm with surprising strength for his age. "One more thing," he said, voice dropping to a whisper. "The man in black. If he speaks to you again, don't just nod. Ask him what he wants. It's a risk, but..." He trailed off, glancing nervously at the door. "But what?" "But he might be the only one who can restore the bindings. He's not like the others. He's a keeper of sorts. Enforces the old agreements when they're broken." "Why would he help us?" Hank's tired eyes met mine. "Because what's breaking through now is something even he fears. Something from deeper down." A heavy knock at the door made us both jump. 3 loud, deliberate knocks that seemed to shake the entire room. Hank's face drained of color. "They found me," he whispered. "Go out the bathroom window, now, and whatever you do, don't look back until you reach your truck." "But go," he hissed, pushing me toward the bathroom as the knocking came again, more insistent. I hesitated, unwilling to leave the old man to face whatever was outside. "They can't take me if I don't let them in," Hank assured me, though his trembling hands suggested less confidence than his words. "But they'll take us both, if you don't get that watch back to the route by nightfall." Another series of knocks, followed by a voice that chilled me to the bone. My daughter's voice, calling plaintively through the door. "Daddy? Why won't you open the door? The man in the black hat said you're in there." Hank's eyes widened in terror. "They shouldn't be able to do that off the route," he whispered. "They're getting stronger faster than I thought. Go. I'll hold them as long as I can." I climbed through the bathroom window, the antique watch clutched in my hand, my daughter's voice, or something wearing her voice, still calling behind me. As I ran toward my truck in the motel parking lot, I heard the door to room 13 splinter open, followed by Hank's scream, a sound abruptly cut short, leaving only silence in its wake. I pushed my truck to its limit on the return journey, racing the setting sun. The new rules Hank had given me were folded in my pocket, still unread. The antique watch lay on the passenger seat, its single hand hovering between symbols I couldn't interpret. My phone rang, my wife's real number. I pulled over at a gas station well away from Route 666 to answer it. "Daniel?" Sarah's voice was tight with worry. "Where are you? I've been trying to reach you all day." "Sorry, I was making a delivery." "Is everything okay? How's Ellie?" A moment of silence that stretched my nerves to breaking point. She had an episode this morning. The doctors say she's stable now, but..." Sarah's voice cracked. "She was saying strange things, Daniel, about a man in a black hat who visits her at night, about a special road where Daddy drives." My blood turned to ice. "What else did she say?" "That the man told her you'd be coming home soon, but not as yourself." Sarah was crying now. "What's going on, Daniel? She's never been like this before." "Listen to me carefully," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Take Ellie and go to your sister's house. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Don't come back to our house until I call you. You're scaring me." "I'm scared too," I admitted. "Please, just do this. I'll explain everything later, I promise." After extracting her agreement, I hung up and immediately checked the watch. The hand had moved, now pointing to a symbol that resembled a crescent moon. I didn't know what it meant, but the movement itself was ominous enough. With trembling fingers, I unfolded Hank's new rules. Amended rules for Route 6, 166. Urgent original rules 1 through 13 still apply when possible. Carry iron and salt at all times. Combine them for maximum effect. If the man in black speaks again, ask what he seeks. His answer determines all. Mile marker 117 is now permanent. If you see it, recite, "I acknowledge only the path before me, not the path beyond. The white church will appear more frequently. If doors open, stay mobile. They cannot enter your vehicle while it's in motion. Names have power. Never say the full name of anyone you love while on the route. If you encounter a reflection of yourself, damage it immediately before it solidifies. The watch never lies. When the hand points to the skull, stop the vehicle and use the reversal incantation written on page 2. I turned the paper over. The incantation was written in a language I didn't recognize, with a phonetic pronunciation guide beneath it. I practiced saying it several times, the syllables awkward on my tongue. The sun touched the horizon, bleeding red across the sky as I merged back onto the highway that would take me to Route 666. I had iron nails from a hardware store and a container of table salt on the seat beside the watch. Pitiful protection against what awaited me, but better than nothing. As I approached the entrance to Route 666, the watch hand moved again, now pointing to a symbol resembling a twisted tree. The road ahead seemed to shimmer slightly, like heat rising from asphalt on a summer day. But it was October, and the evening air was cool. I checked my dashboard clock, 6:17 p.m., hours before my usual 3 a.m. run time. But this was an emergency. I needed to get to mile marker 37 to 40, to the man in black's territory, to ask him what Hank suggested. The original Rule 1 specified driving only between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., but the amended rules suggested that the original rules applied when possible. Given the circumstances, it seemed impossible to wait. I turned on to Route 666, immediately uneasy at how different it looked in the fading twilight. The trees still pressed close to the road, but their shadows seemed more substantial somehow, moving independently of the breeze. The asphalt itself appeared older, cracked in places, with faded lane markings that didn't match my memory. The watch hand moved again, settling on the eye symbol. A warning. I maintained speed between 47 to 57 miles per hour, as per Rule 2, scanning constantly for threats. The twilight deepened rapidly, darkness falling with unnatural speed. Soon my headlights were the only illumination, carving a tunnel of visibility through absolute blackness. No stars appeared overhead, no moon, just darkness so complete it seemed to devour light itself. Mile marker 7 appeared in my headlights, then 12, then 19. The markers passing more quickly than they should have given my speed. The route was compressing somehow, rushing me toward whatever waited ahead. The radio turned on by itself, crackling with static, before settling on what sounded like a children's choir, singing a discordant version of "You Are My Sunshine." I immediately switched it off, as per Rule 5. The temperature in the cab plummeted. I recited my full name 3 times according to Rule 11, but the cold persisted. Frost formed on the windows, creeping inward in intricate patterns that resembled faces in agony. I pulled out the paper with the amended rules, focusing on Rule 7. If you encounter a reflection of yourself, damage it immediately before it solidifies. The rearview mirror caught my attention. My reflection stared back, but its expression didn't match mine. While my face was tight with fear, my reflection smiled calmly. Then it winked. I grabbed one of the iron nails and, without hesitation, drove it into the center of the mirror, cracking the glass. My distorted reflection shattered, the fragments showing different expressions of rage and pain, before the mirror went dark. The watch hand jumped, now pointing at a symbol resembling a door. Something had changed, but was it for better or worse? Mile marker 36 appeared ahead. I was approaching the man in black's territory. The road here narrowed, the forest pressing so close that branches scraped against my truck. Shadows moved between the trees, keeping pace with my vehicle. Then I saw him. The man in black stood at the edge of mile 37, just as before, tall, slender, dressed in an old-fashioned black suit and wide-brimmed hat. He carried his antique valise, his face hidden in shadow. But this time, he raised his hand in a clear gesture to stop. Remembering Hank's advice and the new Rule 3, I slowed the truck and rolled down my window, though every instinct screamed against it. "What do you seek?" I called out, the words feeling strange in my mouth. The man in black approached my truck with that unnaturally smooth movement. He stopped just beside my window, his face still obscured beneath his hat. "Balance," he replied, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "The bindings weaken, the deeper ones wake." "How do I restore the balance?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. The man in black raised his head slightly, allowing me a glimpse of his face, or rather, the absence of one. Where features should have been was only darkness, a void that seemed to extend infinitely. "Mile marker 117, he said. "What was removed must be returned. The key opens the way." He reached out suddenly, placing a cold hand on my arm. Where his fingers touched, my skin burned with an icy fire. "They know you now, Daniel James Mercer. They know your child. The binding was never meant to be broken." I looked down at my arm, seeing 5 black marks where his fingers had touched, marks that resembled the symbols on the watch. "The watch," I gasped in realization. "It's not just protection, it's a key." The man in black inclined his head slightly. The dispatcher knew, as his ancestors knew, one binding remains. It must be placed where the stone once stood. And if I do this, my family will be safe? Nothing is safe, the man in black replied with terrible finality. But the balance may be restored, for a time. With that, he stepped back from my truck, his form already beginning to fade at the edges. Beware the mile marker. They gather there now, feeding on the breach. What you see will test your sanity. As he vanished completely, the watch hand on the passenger seat moved one final time, pointing directly at the skull symbol. Warning or destiny, I couldn't tell, but I knew where I needed to go. Mile marker 117, the impossible marker on a route that officially ended at mile 93, where the binding stone had been removed, where they gathered now. I accelerated back to safe speed, my truck hurtling through the darkness toward a destination that shouldn't exist, carrying a watch that measured proximity to horrors beyond comprehension. The route had chosen me somehow, through Ellie's illness, through my desperation, through Hank's connection. I was being led inevitably toward mile marker 117, toward whatever waited in the breach. As if confirming my thoughts, a sign loomed ahead in my headlights. Mile marker 117, 5 miles. The watch began to vibrate on the seat beside me, the hand spinning rapidly around its face, passing over the skull again and again. Warning or destiny, the rules had changed indeed, and so had I. They say, Route 666 claims everyone eventually. Maybe not the first night, or the 10th, or even the 100th. But sooner or later, the road takes what it's owed. It's been 43 days since I drove toward mile marker 117 with Hank's watch clutched in my hand. 43 days since I faced what waited at the breach. The authorities found my truck abandoned at mile 88, engine running, driver's door open. They found my logbook with meticulous records of routes driven, deliveries made, rules followed. They found no trace of me. But I'm still here in a way. The binding is restored. The watch is embedded in the earth where the stone once stood, between miles 37 and 40, in the man in black's territory. The symbols on its face glow faintly on moonless nights, visible only to those who know to look for them. The balance, as the man in black called it, has been temporarily restored. The price was high, higher than I could have imagined. Sarah and Ellie are safe. Ellie's condition improved dramatically the night the binding was restored. Her doctors called it a miraculous remission. The medical bills vanished from collection agencies' records, replaced by documentation of full payment from an anonymous donor. They moved to Arizona last month, far from Ohio and the haunted stretches of Route 666. They believe I abandoned them. It's better that way, better than knowing the truth. The rules have changed again. Hank's position as night dispatcher has been filled by someone new, someone who hands out a revised list to drivers assigned to Route 666. The list now contains 14 rules. The 14th reads, if you see a truck driver walking along the roadside between miles 37 to 40, wearing a Wilson Freight uniform, do not stop. Do not speak to him. He is where he belongs. I'm not entirely human anymore. Not entirely gone. I exist in the in-between, a guardian of sorts, part of the binding itself. The watch that was once in my possession is now part of me. Its mechanisms merged with what remains of my consciousness. I walk the road nightly, particularly in the man in black's territory. We have an understanding now, he and I. We're both guardians of a boundary that was never meant to be crossed. Both bound to Route 666 by choices made long ago. Sometimes when a truck passes and the driver gives the required nod to the man in black, I catch a glimpse of their face. I see the fear, the determination, the desperate need that keeps them driving this cursed route night after night. I see myself as I once was. The deeper ones still stir beyond the breach. testing the binding, seeking weaknesses. The white church appears more frequently now, its bells tolling 13 hours into the darkness. The eyeless hitchhikers in patrol uniforms multiply. The rules continue to adapt because they must. New drivers still receive the list, still memorize the guidelines that might keep them alive until dawn. Some survive, some don't. The road always claims its due. If you ever find yourself assigned to Route 666, know this: the rules are written in blood and necessity. Follow them exactly. And if you pass mile marker 37 and see a figure in a Wilson Freight uniform walking alongside the man in black, don't slow down. Don't speak to me. I am where I belong, paying the price for those I love, keeping the balance for one more night. This is my route now, forever stretching before me, never reaching dawn. These are my rules now, written in what remains of my soul, and the road goes on.